Florida Senator, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Marco Rubio joins me. Good evening, sir. And I want to draw your attention first to 1962, 61 years ago, to an event that I know your family is deeply aware of. And that's that we had a spy plane over Cuba, and we spotted with 1962 technology those missiles. Why has there been such intelligence brief, even by the United States, not watching this build up in the Gaza Strip, even with new technology?
Well, a couple points here. First, obviously, the lead in this would be Israeli intelligence. By their own admission, the Israelis will tell you they were caught off guard. They were caught unprepared. Not that the threat from Hamas was not well known. It is. But clearly, they did not know that this was happening. This was an imminent attack coming from Gaza by Hamas. And they've admitted that. And they have had inquiries in the past when there have been those failures. There was, for example, after Yom Kippur, almost a 2-year inquiry. And I'm sure those days are coming as well. But right now, they're focused, and we should be helping them focus on this war to eradicate Hamas. And I think we'll have to look at our own systems to see what we knew, what we didn't know, what warning, maybe what signs we missed, or what capabilities have eroded. And so we don't have that intelligence. I think there'll be time for that as well on our end, particularly because there's still existing danger in that region moving forward that we want to be able to provide intelligence support on.
What does Iran gain by helping Hamas do this, and maybe Hezbollah, maybe drawing Israel into a broader war, and maybe drawing us into the war at some point? What does Iran gain from this?
Well, look, they have different agendas to some extent, but ultimately what they share in common, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, is they all want the destruction of the Jewish state. Hamas's stated goal, I mean, it's their mission statement. I mean, they're pretty explicit about it. They want to drive every Jew out of the Middle East. They want a new Islamic fundamentalist Palestinian state that stretches from the Mediterranean all the way to the Jordan. That's their goal. That's why they're involved. And they share that with Iran. So what Iran gains is they want the destruction of the Jewish state. They want to drive Israel because they want to be the dominant power in the region. They want to be the dominant power in the Middle East. That ultimately brings them in conflict with Saudi Arabia, but their most immediate target is to drive the Jews out of the Middle East. And they have that objective in common. And to use Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad and all these other groups as proxies to carry this out is part of their strategy. I think the other thing they gain is all this news out there. This has now been widely discussed, and I think it's appropriate. They see this sort of Saudi-Israeli deal coming together, and one of the best ways to disrupt that, or try to disrupt that, is to create a situation in which Israel is seen in the Arab world as out there killing innocent Arabs, and that will somehow create pressure within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and make it impossible for them to reach that agreement with Israel. So I think part of their strategy in the short term is to disrupt that from happening.
Well, you know, I would suspect that they wouldn't have made this move now unless they thought that they would ultimately prevail, you know, that if they get drawn into this, that they prevail. If it comes down to, if push comes to shove, and Iran really invites a broader war, you know, can Israel handle it themselves, or do we necessarily get dragged into it if we get to that ugly point? And combined, is that the end of Iran?
No, I think two things to understand. Israel will not be defeated militarily, not by Iran, not by Hezbollah, not by Hamas. And their goal is not the military defeat of Israel. Their goal is to obviously erode Israel's military capability, but ultimately to collapse Israel's economy from within. They love to hear that airplanes are not flying. They love to hear that the Israeli markets are way down. That's what they want. They want Israel to become a place that no one wants to live and no one wants to do business and no one wants to visit because it's too dangerous, it's too unstable, it can't defend itself, or it's faced under constant attack. Their goal is the collapse from within, not the straight-up military defeat. As far as Iran is concerned, look, a lot of that's going to depend on the administration. And look, I'm happy to see that they've moved naval assets to the region. But ultimately, I think we need to be very clear with the Iranian regime, and that is, if American troops in the region or American personnel in the region are attacked by proxies of Iran, we will consider that an attack by the Iranian state, and we will take those measures. If Americans in the region come into harm's way because of these proxies, the leaders of those groups, including the leaders of the IRGC, to become enemy combatants and therefore valid targets for U.S. action, no matter where in the world they're operating or hiding. And I think that's critically important at this stage, because I do think that left untethered, Iran will potentially try to expand this conflict to that situation from Lebanon. I think that right now is what's on everyone's mind and of deep concern. And Iran needs to know there will be significant and real consequences, not some symbolic measure, but some real measures as a result of that.
Qatar is housing the leader of Hamas, Haniyeh, and we saw pictures of him looking, quite pleased with the destruction that was going on in Israel right after the rockets were fired. And then he gathers everyone down to pray because of what had happened. We also have a military base in Qatar. How about that complicated relationship for us?
Well, it's very complicated, but this guy's a coward, right? Why isn't he living in Gaza? Why is he over there in Qatar living a life of luxury, watching this from remote control? I think he's a valid enemy combatant target, in my view. He's not a civilian leader. Hamas is not a civilian organization. They are a terrorist organization, the dedicated purpose of the destruction of the Jewish state and replacing it with a fundamentalist Islamic government in a Palestinian state that covers all the area we know today as Israel. That's their goal. And they are willing to slaughter and murder and rape and defile the dead bodies of women, of teenage girls, of children, of the elderly. These are barbaric, savage practices by individuals, and Hamas needs to be eradicated. And it's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be pleasant. This is not an antiseptic war. This is not going to be an easy conflict. But Israel has no choice but to completely eradicate Hamas as a viable entity operating from Gaza. They cannot coexist with them, and we need to be supportive of that effort every step of the way.
Senator Marco Rubio, thank you, sir.
Thank you.